Rachel was a tall, beautiful young woman, the kind of person who naturally turned heads wherever she went. Now one day, she met Mike at a bank. They got talking, exchanged phone numbers and kept in touch. And before long, they fell in love. Well, from that moment on, Mike couldn't stop talking about Rachel everywhere he went. It was the same thing. She's beautiful, she's tall, she's exactly my type. That is all anybody seems to hear from Mike. Anyway, the family met. A wedding date was fixed, and before they knew it, they were husband and wife. Everything was going well. Then one evening, barely 2 months after the wedding, something happened that changed everything. So Rachel was on her way home from work when she was involved in a terrible road accident. She survived it, but she suffered a severe spinal cord injury, and from that day on, she could not walk again. At first, Mike stayed by her side, but as the months went by, things began to change. Then about a year later, he got a transfer to another state. So Mike packed his things, he left Rachel and he never came back. So growing up, African parents never joke about marriage. So once the topic came up, everybody had something to say. Whether they had been married for 5 years or 50 years, everyone had an opinion. So I remember a young man who told his parents he had finally found the woman he wanted to marry. So his father asked immediately, which family is she from? He wanted to know who the parents of the lady are and what kind of family they will be bringing into their home. So family background mattered a lot. In many African homes, marriage was not just between two people, it was between two families. That is why parents wanted to know the kind of family their son or daughter was marrying into. They did not want to be connected to a family with a bad reputation. And some also worried about illnesses that may be running in the families. So even after parents were satisfied with the family, they still wanted to know more things. Like what kind of person is he or she? How does she or he behaves? I also remember one man in our community. People used to say he was difficult and he didn't treat people well. So when his children were old enough to get married, many families kept their distance. It was not because the children had done anything wrong, but they simply didn't want to become in-law with someone who had a bad reputation. So that's why you often heard African parents saying, character is everything. So that is what many African parents believed, that money can go, beauty can fade, but character follows you everywhere. And that's why they pay more attention to how a person behaves than to what they want. Even after all the questions had been asked and the wedding was over, the advice didn't stop there. In fact, that is when it really began. There was a young couple in our neighborhood. So the husband had a good banking job and everything seemed perfect. They were always happy, always smiling together. Then one day, the company started laying off workers and he lost his job. Things became difficult. Money stopped coming in like before. Before long, people noticed the wife's attitude had changed. She started coming home late, sometimes she didn't even come at all. So an elderly woman in our neighborhood simply shook her head one day and said, marriage is not a bed of roses. Many African parents believed every marriage would have good days and the difficult days. There would be misunderstandings, money problems, and other challenges. They believed the couples who stayed together were the ones who understood that marriage was not always going to be easy. So, there was a young couple who were the talk of the town. Everybody admired them. They were always together, and it looked like nothing could ever come between them. So after the wedding, life became difficult. Money became tight and family responsibilities increased. And so the little arguments slowly became bigger for them, and it didn't take long before people started saying love alone cannot keep a marriage. So many African parents believe love was important, but it was not enough on its own. So they believe marriage also needed patience, understanding, respect, and commitment. So without those, they felt love would slowly fade under the pressure of everyday life. So there was a couple everyone admired so much in our neighborhood. So the wife always served her husband meals on her nails and greeted him with respect. But the husband treated her the same way. He never spoke badly about her, but instead he always praised her and made her feel valued. So some people even wonder what their secret was as the year passed. Neighbor realized it was not money or charms that kept them together. It was the respect they had for each other. So in many African homes, that was seen as one of the strongest foundation of a lasting marriage. An elderly couple had been married for over 40 years. So, like every other couple, they also had their own disagreements too. Sometimes you could hear them arguing, but before the day ended, they would sit together outside, talking, laughing, and even eating together. So some people used to wonder how they managed to stay together for so long. So one day, the old man smiled and said, "We don't go to bed angry." And in many African homes, people believe that solving problems before sleeping kept little misunderstandings from turning into lifelong bitterness. So one young wife had every reason to leave her husband who just lost his job. So money, there was no money, and almost every day came with a new challenge up and down. So people around her kept saying, if I were you, madam, I would have left long ago, but she stayed. She encouraged her husband instead of tearing him down. So little by little things began to pick. He found another job, the family got back on their feet, and years later, people still talk about how they survived those difficult days. So that's why many African homes held on to one saying is that a patient wife builds the home. A woman never stopped talking about her marriage. Every time she met her friends, she would say, "My husband just bought another bag of rice. He filled the freezer with meat. He even gave me plenty of money this week." So one of her friends became jealous. She went home and started comparing her own husband to her friend's husband. They argue almost every day because she wanted the same life. One afternoon, she decided to surprise her friend with a visit. To her shock, there was no bag of rice. The freezer was empty, and the children were lying down hungry. That is when she realized not everything people say about marriage is true. Don't compare your marriage with others. A woman was deeply hurt after an argument with her husband, so she packed her clothes and went back to her parents' house. She determined never to return, so days turned into weeks. One afternoon, her grandmother visited and sat quietly beside her. So after listening to everything, she said, if every mistake ends a marriage, so very few marriages will survive. The word stayed with her. She went back home and together they walked things out. It was not because the pain was not real. She simply chose to forgive and rebuild her marriage. So one woman had a habit of telling everyone about her marriage. So anytime she argued with her husband, the neighbors heard about it. Her friend knew every disagreement happening in their family, and before long, the whole area was talking about their family. Months later, the couple settled their differences and became happy again, but the neighbors couldn't let it go. So whenever they saw the husband and wife laughing together or holding hands in the public, they would laugh and say, we know what really happened in their house, don't mind them. That is why many African families warn their children, don't wash your dirty linen in public. Once your private problem become public problem, you cannot control how people remember them. A wealthy young man wanted to marry a beautiful lady. He had money, the cars, and everything many people admire in a man. But the lady's father kept asking one question: does he fear God? The young man was surprised. He thought his words could be enough for him. The father simply smiled and said, money can build a house, but it can't build a peaceful home. So in many African families, people believe that someone who fears God will be more likely to show love, respect, honest and commitment in marriage. So one man left his house before sunrise every morning. Some days he came back late at night, very tired and covered in sweat. So his children hardly understood why he worked so hard. But one evening, his son asked him, "Dad, why are you always working every day?" The man smiled and said, "Because this family depends on me." Years later, the boy finally understood the sacrifices his father had made. That is why many African homes admired a hardworking husband. They believed providing for the family was one of the greatest ways a man can show love in his marriage. The wedding date has been fixed. The invitation cards were out. The food had been prepared and family members had traveled from far and near. So everyone was waiting for the groom to arrive. But hours after hours, there was no sign of him coming. So morning turned to afternoon and people started asking questions. So by nightfall, it became clear that the groom was not coming. So it was a painful reminder of something many African families often said, that before making a life-changing decision like this, take your time to pray and seek God direction before choosing a life partner. An old man once said, "Marriage is the only journey you don't travel alone. If you chose the wrong person, every step becomes difficult." So as children, we laugh and didn't even understand much of it then. But as we grow older, those words started making sense. So many African parents believe choosing the right partner was one of the biggest decisions anyone could make because you will live with the choice for the rest of your life. As I think about Michael and Rachel's story again, I can't help but wonder, maybe this is why our parents talk so much about marriage. They knew beauty could fade, money could come and go, and life could change overnight. But they always hope we chose someone who will stand by us when those difficult moments comes. These were some of the marriage lessons many African children grew up hearing. Some people still live by them, while others believe times have changed. Whether you agree with them or not, those conversations shaped how generations of Africans thought about marriage. So, which of these lessons do you grow up hearing, and do you still believe it today? Let me know in the comments.